Greetings everyone, my name is Etherville, and welcome back to my Let's Play of A Valley Without Wind. In the last part, I completed the tutorial region and made it to the settlement, as well as world map. Before going on to do missions, let's go equip the enchants I collected that were laying across the settlement floor. Note that these enchants laying around are kind of semi-randomized. But there are similar ones that will be here, like the Featherfall enchant which I got earlier, which prevents me from taking falling damage, as well as the other one which emits light from the character's body. Note that some of them are side grades, some of them are upgrades, some of them are downgrades. It's semi-random. Though it's quite nice to see how many variety of effects you can have. They can be equipped on the head, legs, torso, left arm, head, as well as having the health, mana, and attack power enchants. The health, mana, and attack power enchants are a little bit special, as the only max you can have for them is that they must add up to 10 at max. But they have non-linear effects, as in the more you increase the amount of power you give to each of those enchants, the less effect it'll have, compared to the previous level. That's why I bought that health enchant level 2. Right now I'm focusing more on being an attack and mana person, as enemies here aren't too dangerous in terms of health. In harder difficulty settings, definitely I would focus more on health, but here it's not really important. Here are some spellgems I could craft, but here are the ones that I'm missing items of and the ones I currently know of. I really want to get the Leafy Whip too. That's why I'm adding it to my loot goals. I have the Jade, but I'm missing 5 cherries in total, and I need an Earth Essence. The Earth Essence is currently the hardest to get, as there's no region that's currently not covered by the Scourge of Wind. And of course, shown here is that there is a food shortage that needs to be taken care of soon, otherwise the survivors are going to take huge morale penalties. I say huge, but the amount of morale penalties depends on what difficulty setting you put on the city building. That can be changed. The harder it is, the more impact. Anyway, across the world map here we can find randomized missions. These missions are one of the best ways to collect spellgems and magic, as well as settlements. Here I had a choice between getting the Leafy Whip right now, but I really needed a new farm, a covered farm to be specific, as that'll solve several of my food issues. So I took this mission instead. It's kind of a trade-off, as missions don't last forever, though they'll eventually disappear after a while. Apparently time moves faster when you're in one of these squares, so keep that in mind. Alright, this is a boss delve mission. The boss delve missions are almost exactly what they say on the tin. You basically have to go from the higher elevations, going from near the top of a cave, going down into the depths in order to assassinate a certain boss. After doing so, you'll be able to collect the spell gem, or other resources, or other unlocks, and you'll be able to move on. Thankfully though, because this is the first continent, bosses and enemies are very much of a cinch to take care of, as you can pretty much ignore their elemental weaknesses. Well, as long as you don't have 100% elemental resistance to a particular element. Like here, for instance, I'm using the element that bats are resistant to, mainly because of its convenience, but it's doing a reasonable amount of damage. It's mostly weak to fire, but I don't have a long-range fire spell other than the fire touch. Using the fire touch is extremely risky, as it's very close range and it's one of the lowest damaging spells I have. So there's a trade-off there. But of course, on this difficulty setting, it isn't too much of a hassle. On harder difficulties, it's much more of a hassle too. It's much more important to take care of the elemental affinities, lest you die very often. Though in this game that, well, it hurts morale, but it's not a permanent loss. Unlike the sequel, but we'll get into that. As we defeated all the bosses, I'll be collecting all these minerals, and down there's the chest warping out. Because of this, we got a Guardian Power Scroll, and we got the Fire Touch level 2 spell gem. The Fire Touch level 2 spell gem is obviously more powerful than the level 1 version, so I'll be replacing it. Note that when you collect the spell gem, either if you make it out in the wild or just craft it yourself, it can have a variety of effects. Like this one, the Fire Touch 2 spell has a 10% less mana cost. Though we have more control of what effects will be added to the spell gem if we craft it ourselves, but we'll get into that. I'm using the Guardian Scroll here to place a covered farm. I don't have an optimal location for placing it, but I decided to place it in the grassland as the settlement survivors really need food. There we have it. The covered farm has been placed, and the food problems have been solved. But now, there are several things we really need to do now. We really need to upgrade our spell gems to level 2. Right now I really want the Leafy Whip too. And we really need to get a wind shelter. Or a windmill. Because those grayed out regions are basically full of scorching wind. The problem with scorching wind is that you can go through it, but you'll constantly take damage, and it'll be pushed around depending on how far away you are from the non-windy regions. So it's pretty much not optimal to go there. Well, you could if you're looking for a challenge, especially to challenge those lieutenants, but it's strongly not recommended, especially at hard difficulties where your health drains much faster and any single hit can kill you. So yeah, we really need a wind shelter to clear up the region. A windmill. But of course, we have to rely on one of two things. We either have to rely on, well, three things to be precise. We have to rely on the random mission generation, finding secret mission locations across the world, or just buying the Guardian Power Scroll for windmills from those Ilari. But those Guardian Scrolls are really expensive. I don't have enough money or consciousness shards in this regard in order to purchase them. So I have to seek them out. But I do like the fact that the developers actually gave the option, just in case we actually have enough consciousness shards, but we haven't found it. And I'm going on another boss stuff mission. The key note about the spell gems is that the level they'll have is one more than the current character's level, or the current world level. In this case, as we're on Continent 1 and I haven't defeated any of the lieutenants, the continent level, as well as the character level, is set to 1. And because of that, the spell gems, the maximum quality spell gems they can have, must be level 2. Well, normally, the normal spell gems. There are some exceptions, but we'll get into that, especially in crafting. By completing that mission, I got the Fireball 2 spell. So finally, I have a fire type spell gem that can be used at long range. Now I could have gotten the Forest Rage too, but I really don't prefer using the projectiles for that as it takes quite a bit of mana. Here I wanted to upgrade my Ball Lightning spell to level 2, so I decided to take this mission. As the Ball Lightning is one of my favorite average type spells. And the fireball basically fires a, well, fireball at whatever direction your cursor is pointing at. The difference from the ball lightning and fireball is that the ball lightning it arcs a little bit and falls to the ground, whereas if the fireball hits the ground, it'll immediately dissipate. So there's a bit of a trade-off there. Now I'm having a boss tower mission. The boss tower mission is kind of like the opposite of a boss delve mission. Instead of going to a cave system and going as down as possible in order to reach and defeat the boss, now we're going to a tower, going from the bottom floor, and going as high as possible, reaching the top and defeating the boss in question. Really though, it's basically the same type of mission, though only going up. I kind of prefer this as the layouts for towers are much more convenient compared to the cave systems. And below there is all the water there is acid, so don't run at it. These rooms are randomly generated, yes, but to be fair, I would say it's procedurally generated in a sense, but all of these rooms, it's not based off of pure logic, it's based off of a combination of the developers and player contributions. AKA, these maps are kind of like in XML files of sorts, so players can create their own sets of maps, and they can be randomly chosen if they're in the correct environment. Yeah, also this game was kind of made on a budget, so that's why a lot of the environments are kind of stock, as well as the areas that you can't see being black. It's like in these towers, instead of having a tower background or tile set for the floor, for instance, and walls, it's instead of black boxes. So, and of course, it's especially emphasized in the animations. They're quite janky. This was fixed in the sequel, which is nice, but... And here, I completed the boss tower mission. Time to get out of here. Really though, platforming here is not too much of a problem, but like I said, once we get into the next content, when I actually start to raise the difficulty settings, platforming will become more difficult with the advent of all those needed hazards, especially at the highest level difficulty. I'll need a lot of wooden platforms and wooden crates for that. Anyways, warping out of there, skip the walking out. Here I decided to go on another boss tower mission in order to get the Cleft Smoglet spell, which is my first entropy spell. Might as well take this time to explain what each spell types are. Basically, all spell gems fall under 6 elements categories. The red spell gems are fire-based, the green spell gems are earth-based, the yellow spell gems are air-based, the blue spell gems are water-based, the white spell gems are light-based, and the purple spell gems are entropy-based. All of them come with their own teams as well as types. Like for instance, the air ones being more of the arcing, summon-based, the fire ones being more destructive, the white ones being a kind of a mix, water being more flowing, etc, etc. It even applies to the enemies, but... Also, forgot to mention earlier, you cannot exit boss rooms unless you defeat the bosses. Well, you can exit out the previous rooms, but you can't access new rooms until you defeat them. There you have it. The giant clockwork bee has been destroyed. And with that, I got the Cleft Smoglet spell. The Cleft Smoglet spell, when I get out and demonstrate it, it basically fires a constant, well, rapid fires 2 entropy beams left and right of the current character. It has a nice DPS and can be used especially well when you're surrounded. Though be careful of the mana cost. And the spell modifier here I get is plus 20% mana regen. So that's pretty nice. Demonstrating right here. Of course my mana regen is high enough to constantly use it. Though the issue here is that it doesn't have a good damage per shot, per individual shot, but when combined with DPS, it's awesome. I decided to run back to the settlement here to restock on wooden crates and wooden platforms, as they're ever-presently useful. I'll be buying several of those other items later on as well. Here I could dispatch my settlement survivors in order to collect those essences, like the Earth Essence, which I need for the Leafy Whip. A lot of these essences are required for collecting several of the spellgems. But luckily, when I went out into the world, I found a mission that actually gave a Leafy Whip. The type of mission which contains the Leafy Whip as a reward is called a Destroy Umbra Vortex mission. A Destroy Umbra Vortex mission usually takes place in a cave, which, due to the Umbra Vortex, means you can jump infinitely, or basically fly through the air. Now, if you complete enough Destroy Umbra Vortex missions successfully, enemies will start to be able to do so the same. But right now, for the first few Umbra Vortex missions, enemies will not be able to fly in the air, like you can, or jump infinitely. They'll just walk slowly. And of course, the objective of this mission, while in these strange vortexes conditions, is to kill all the boss-type enemies. And considering the many of them, it can get quite hairy once they gain the ability to jump infinitely. And also in higher difficulty modes, because they can easily swarm you. So be near guard and use long-range weapons. But with that, I have finally obtained the Leafy Whip. The Leafy Whip spell is an Earth-type spell which does short-range damage and can destroy background objects. The reason why I like it so much is because even though it has a moderate mana cost, or relatively high, it does a ton of damage because it's a melee type and can destroy background objects, which makes it awesome for taking on enemies. Especially considering that, comparing to other spells, if I want to take out enemies at close range without losing too much mana, I would surely go for this one, and another type. It's too bad there are not whips for each of the elements, that I know of, though there may be. But I like it a lot. There are other spells which do even more damage at once, but they have a huge mana cost, and, well, I prefer a usability in DPS. For example, the Creeping Death spellgem series, they all do a ton of damage per spellgem use. However, they take a ton of mana to use, and because of that, they have low DPS. It's good if you want to take out a lot of minor enemies at once, especially a huge group of them, as it can pass right through them. But if you want to do sustained damage on a single target, it's not a good idea to use it. Or sustained damage on multiple targets, to be fair. But it has its uses, especially when I use run and gun or peek out maneuvers for bosses. Right now I'm just exploring some of the icy wastelands, snowfields, buildings in order for some new spellgem materials, or enchants. And from this point on, I'll try cutting out going out of the buildings, or ignoring useless buildings, in order to speed up the process of LP. Because, as I said earlier, exploring everything 100% is not really necessary for this game. It's completely everything is procedure generated and relatively random, so it's best to do everything smartly and abuse Storm Dash and other quick abilities in order to quickly get all the items you want, as well as looking at stash rooms or secret mission areas. Right now, I'm trying to explore the cave system down here in order to find a secret mission area, as I really need to get a windmill in order to push back the wind in some region. As I feel that I'm prepared enough to take on one of the evil overlord's lieutenants. And the best way to find it is through combing through all the buildings here, as well as going deeper into the cave system. Now you can also find secret missions while they're on the overworld itself. The thing is though, it requires quite a bit of searching, and I feel like it spawns more rapidly in underground areas. And besides, the secret missions usually have greater rewards as well as better storyline that reveals than normal missions. As well as normal missions, secret missions are random, but because you have to search out for them, they basically have better rewards. Like here, for example. This one is another Destroy Umbra Vortex mission, but because it's secret, we get more items, as well as story, and the wind shelter, or windmill, which I'm looking for. Note that I'm only going to be exploring this first level of this cave system. Some cave systems, or a lot of them, allow you to go deeper and deeper into the ground, almost infinitely, or infinitely maybe. But as you go down further and further, the level of the enemy mobs get higher and higher. For each level deeper you get, well, in this one it's currently just one level below, so the enemies here are the same level as me. And if I go one level deeper, aka the dungeon map will change, then enemies will be one level tougher, so on and so forth. So yeah, I won't be going through there until probably in the next continent. Mainly because I want more characters to play with. Trying to collect enough of these gems in order to get new materials for spell gems, as you never know when you'll need them in the future. But of course it takes time, so make sure to manage your time. You can take as much as you want, but it's best if you want to be optimal. Here's another building with both a stash room and a secret mission area above. Always take a look out for every secret mission, as they always tend to have very good rewards. As more of the world gets unlocked, more types of mission types will get unlocked as well, as more choices. Because we're just starting out on this first continent, don't have that much equipment in the terms of spellgems, enchants, settlement survivors, and actual land. We don't have that much choice. Of course, personally speaking, I find several mission types to be harder than others. Speaking of the music, while searching for the items, let me take a moment to talk about the music. The music of this game is a mix of rather somber and gloomy, dark tones, but with some foreboding, but also with some sense of hope of fixing the future. I do like it, though I wish there was more variety, especially with how long the game can get. Anyways, with this secret mission in mind, we now have a new type. It's called the Stealth Assassination in a Building. Here, the objective is to assassinate a boss. However, because it's considered a stealth one, it's done in the dark, and on the minimap, it will not mark where the boss you have to kill is. In fact, it won't mark any of the boss rooms. So basically, you have to go search out every room, almost every room, to figure out where the boss is. But thankfully, at least there's a marker showing where the nearest enemy is. But yeah, I like to take these stealth assassinations slow and steadily, especially with harder difficulties. I keep repeating what I say about harder difficulties, but really, when you play this game at harder, especially combat difficulties, it's really easy to die. I mean, you can get killed in about just 10 seconds if you're not careful, either by getting swarmed, or by the fact that enemies get really easily tough in terms of contact or melee damage, as well as projectile. And right now, trust me, these aren't actually the most annoying or dangerous enemies. Scalebots and espers, for the most part, are relatively easy to take care of. But once the scalebots and espers start to get their tougher forms and upgrades, they really become a nuisance. And more accurate and more damaging, to be fair. And here we found the boss we're supposed to be assassinating. It's usually marked by a red line, but because he was weak to earth, I easily took him out with the leafy whip. While reading these messages, or paused, or whatever, you are basically invincible. So that's pretty nice. And more story about the game. I'll probably have to make a separate part for this in order to go over what happened. But yeah, basically what it says is that the glyph bearers, aka the players, they have a low survival rate. Anyways, teleporting to the next part, or skipping ahead to the next part, as I really want to show me walking all the way back. I know we have the usage of those warp holes, but they don't go everywhere, so you have to reach one in order to get to another place. So it's kind of slow sailing. Right now, what's left is to clear out the rest of the clear system, defeat the bosses, and get to 2 stash rooms. Kind of slow going in a way. Skipping ahead to get to the boss. Yeah, some of the buildings are kind of don't have anything to look out for, so it kind of slows down the pace. And there's no indicator other than going inside. Plus the fact that some buildings you have to go up a few floors to see some of the hidden rewards. So yeah, it pays for exploration, but it doesn't really pay to be a completionist. But I do like the variety in spells and such, though I feel that some spells are less useful than others in terms of not only the statistics, but their utilities. But I do find spells like the Storm Dash to be very vital for transferring to all these regions, and we'll see others in the future. But with that, I got enough items from the cave system. It's time to get out of here. But anyways, now that we've completed all these missions, and secret and mandatory, or the ones shown on the map, I feel that we're geared enough to take on the first lieutenants. In the next part, I'll deploy the first wind shelter, or window. Thanks for watching everyone, and have a nice day. Doodles!